To jerky down there. Sturm. I'm going after him. He yelled to Tannis. Launching himself into the air, he grabbed hold of the chain and slid right down into the pot. Now we've lost both of them. Tannis groaned. Flint, come with me. Riverwind, stay up here with Raceland and Gold Moon. See if you can reverse that damned wheel. No task, not you. Too late. The Kender, screaming enthusiastically, leaped into the chain and began shinnying down. Tannis and Flint jumped into the hole too. Tannis wrapped his arms and legs around the chain, hanging on just above the Kender, but the dwarf missed his hold, landing in the pot, helmet first. Caraman promptly stepped on him. The Draconians in the pot pinned the warrior against the side. He punched one, sending it slamming to the other side, and drew his dagger on the other as it fumbled for its sword. Caraman stabbed before the Draconian could get the sword free, but the warrior's dagger glanced off the creature's armor and was jarred out of Caraman's grasp. The Draconian went for his face, trying to gouge his eyes out with its clawed hands. Grabbing the Draconian's wrists in a crushing grip, Caraman succeeded in wrenching his hands away from his face. The two powerful beings, human and Draconian, struggled against the side of the pot. The other Draconian recovered from Caraman's blow and seized its sword, but its dive for the warrior came to an abrupt halt when Sturm, sliding down the chain, kicked it hard in the face with his heavy boot. The Draconian reeled backwards, the sword flying from his grasp. Sturm leaped and tried to club the creature with the flat of his sword, but the Draconian thrust the blade aside with its hands. "Get off me!" Flint roared from the bottom of the pot. Blinded by his helm, he was being slowly crushed by Caraman's big feet. In a spurt of ferocious anger, the dwarf straightened his helm, then heaved himself up, causing Caraman to lose his footing and tumble forward into the Draconian. The creature sidestepped, while Caraman staggered into the huge chain. The Draconian swung its sword wildly. Caraman ducked, and the sword clanged uselessly against the chain, notching the blade. Flint hurled himself at the Draconian, hitting it squarely in the stomach with his head. The two fell against the side. The pot gained momentum, swirling the foul mists around them. Keeping his eyes on the action below, Tannis lowered himself down the chain. "Stay put," he snarled at Tasselhoff. Letting go his grip, Tannis dropped down and landed in the midst of the melee. Task, disappointed but reluctant to disobey Tannis, clung to the chain with one hand while he reached into his pouch and pulled out a rock, ready to drop it on the head of an enemy. He hoped. The pot began to sway as the combatants fell against the sides in their struggles, all the while dropping lower and lower, causing the other pot, filled with screaming and cursing Draconians, to rise higher and higher. Riverwind, standing at the hole with the gully dwarves, could see very little through the mist. He could, however, hear thumps and curses and groans from the pot holding his friends. Then, out of the mist, rose the other pot. Draconians stood, swords in their hands, staring open-mouthed up at him, their long red tongues panting in anticipation. In moments, he and Gold Moon, Raceland, and 15 gully dwarves would be facing about 20 angry Draconians. He spun around, stumbled over a gully dwarf, regained his balance, and ran to the mechanism. Somehow he had to stop the pot from rising. The huge wheel was turning slowly, the chain screeching through the spokes. Riverwind stared at it with the idea of grabbing the chain in his bare hands. A flurry of red shoved him aside. Raceland watched the wheel for an instant, timing its rotation. Then he jammed the staff of mages in between the feet and the floor. The staff shivered for an instant, and Riverwind held his breath, fearing the staff would snap. But it held. The mechanism shuddered to a stop. Riverwind, Gold Moon yelled from where she had remained by the hole. The plainsman ran over to the edge, Raceland followed. The gully dwarves, lining up around the hole, were having a wonderful time, thoroughly enjoying one of the most interesting events to occur in their lives. Only Book1 moved away from the edge. She trotted after Raceland, grasping his robe whenever possible. Breathed Riverwind as he looked down into the swirling mist. Caraman tossed overboard the Draconian he had been fighting. It fell with a shriek into the mist. The big warrior had claw marks on his face and a sword slash on his right arm. Sturm, Tanis, and Flint still battled the second Draconian, who seemed willing to kill regardless of the consequences. When it finally became clear that hitting was not enough, Tanis stubbed it with its dagger. The creature sank down, immediately turning to rock, holding Tanis's weapon fast in its stony corpse. Then the pot lurched to a halt, jolting everyone. "Look out! Neighbors!" yelled Tasselhoff, dropping off the chain. Tanis looked over to see the other pot filled with Draconians, swinging only about 20 feet away. Armed to the teeth, the Draconians were preparing a boarding maneuver. Two clambered up onto the edge of the pot, ready to leap across the misty gap. Karen leaned over the edge of the pot and made a wild and vicious swing with his sword in an attempt to slash one of the boarders. He missed, and the momentum of his swing sent the pot rotating on its chain. Caraman lost his balance and fell forward, his great weight tipping the pot dangerously. He found himself staring directly down at the ground far below him. Sturm grabbed hold of Caraman's collar and yanked him back, causing the pot to rock erratically. Tanis slipped, landing on his hands and knees at the bottom of the pot, where he discovered that the stone Draconian had decayed into dust, allowing him to retrieve his dagger. "Here they come!" Flint yelled, hauling Tanis to his feet. One Draconian launched itself toward him and
somewhat
caught
clean.
hold of the edge of the pot with its clawed hands. The pot tilted precariously once again. "Get over there!" Tanis shoved Caraman to the opposite side, hoping the warrior's weight would keep the pot stable. Sturm hacked at the Draconian's hands, trying to force it to let go. Then another Draconian flew over, gauging its distance better than the first. It landed in the pot next to Sturm. "Don't move!" Tanis screamed at Caraman as the warrior instinctively charged into combat. The pot tilted. The big man quickly returned to his position. The pot righted itself. The Draconian, hanging onto the edge, its fingers oozing green, let go, spread its wings, and floated down into the mist. Tanis spun around to fight the Draconian that had landed in the pot and fell over Flint, knocking the dwarf off his feet again. The half-elf staggered against the side as the pot rocked. He stared down. The mists parted, and he saw the ruined city of Zak-Tsaroth far below him. When he drew back, feeling sick and disoriented, he saw Tasselhoff fighting the Draconian. The little Kender crawled up the creature's back and bashed it on the head with a rock. At the bottom of the pot, Flint picked up Caraman's dropped dagger and stabbed the same creature in the leg. The Draconian screamed as the blade bit deep, knowing more Draconians were about to fly over. Tanis looked up in despair, but the despair turned to hope when he saw Riverwind and Gold Moon staring down through the mist. "Bring us back up!" Tanis yelled frantically. Then something hit him on the head. The pain was excruciating. He felt himself falling and falling and falling. Raceland did not hear Tanis's yell. The mage had already gone into action. Come here, my friends, Raceland said swiftly. The spellbound gully dwarves gathered eagerly around him. Those bosses down there want to hurt me, he said softly. The gully dwarves growled. Several frowned darkly. A few shook their fists at the pot full of draconians. But you can help, Raceland said. You can stop them. The gully dwarves stared at the mage dubiously. Friendship, after all, went only so far. All you must do, Raceland said patiently, is run over and jump on that chain. He pointed at the chain attached to the draconian's paw. The gully dwarves' faces brightened. That didn't sound bad. In fact, it was something they did almost daily when they missed catching hold of the ball. Raceland waved his arm. Go, he ordered. The gully dwarves, all except Book1, glanced at each other, then dashed to the edge of the hole and, yelling wildly, flung themselves onto the chain above the draconians, clinging to it with marvelous dexterity. The mage ran over to the wheel, Book1 trotting along after him. Grabbing the staff of Magius, he tugged it free. The wheel shivered and began to move once again, turning more and more rapidly as the weight of the gully dwarves caused the draconian pot to plummet back down into the mists. Several of the draconians who had been perched on the edge, about to jump into the other pot, were caught off guard by the sudden jolt. They lost their balance and fell. Though their wings stopped their fall, they shrieked in rage as they drifted to the ground below, their cries contrasting oddly with the gleeful shouts of the gully dwarves. River Wind leaned out over the edge of the hole and caught hold of the companion's hand as it reached the wheel. Are you all right? Gold Moon asked anxiously, leaning over to help Caravan out. Tanis is hurt, Caravan said, supporting the half-elf. It's just a problem. Tanis protested, groggily. He felt a large lump rising on the back of his skull. I thought I was falling out of that thing. He shuddered at the memory. We can't get down that way, Sturm said, climbing out of the pot. And we can't stay around up here. It won't take them long to get this lift back in operation, and then they'll be after us. We'll have to go back. No, don't go. Book1 clutched at Raceland. I know way to highball. She tugged at his sleeve, pointing north. Good way, secret way. No bosses, she said softly, stroking his hand. I not let bosses get you. You good. We don't seem to have much choice. We've got to get down there, Tanis said, wincing when Gold Moon's staff touched him. Then the healing power flowed through his body. He relaxed as the pain eased and sighed. As you said, they've lived here for years. Flint growled and shook his head as Book1 started down the corridor, heading north. Stop! Listen! Tasselhoff called softly. They heard the sound of clawed feet coming toward them. Draconians, said Sturm. We've got to get out of here. Head back west. I knew it, Flint grumbled, scowling. That gully dwarfs led us right into those lizards. Wait. Gold Moon gripped Tanis's arm. Look at her. The half-elf turned to see Book1 remove something limp and shapeless from the bag she carried over her shoulder. Stepping up to the wall, she waved the thing in front of the stone slab and muttered a few words. The wall shivered, and within seconds, a doorway appeared, leading into darkness. The companions exchanged uneasy glances. Their choice. Tax money. The rattle and clank of armored Draconians could be heard clearly, marching down the corridor toward them. Bracelet, light, he ordered. The mage spoke, and the crystal on his staff flared. He and Bupu and Tanis quickly passed through the secret door. The rest followed, and the other door slid shut behind them. The mage's staff revealed a small square room, decorated with wall carvings, so covered with green slime that they were impossible to distinguish. They stood in silence as they heard Draconians pass in the corridor. They must have heard the fight, Sturm whispered. It won't take them long to get the lift in motion. Then we'll have the whole Draconian force after us. I know way down. Bupu waved her hand, deprecating. Don't worry. How did you open the door? Raceman asked, curiously, kneeling beside Bupu. Magic, she said shyly, and she held out her hand. Lying in the gully for scrubbing palm was a dead rat, its teeth fixed in a permanent grimace. Raceman raised his eyebrows. Then Tassel touched his arm. It's not magic, Raceman. Tender whispered. It's a hidden flame. I saw it when she pointed at the wall, and I was about to say something when she went through this magic loophole. She steps on it when she gets close to the door and waves at me. The Kender giggled. She probably tripped it once accidentally while carrying the rat. Bupu gave the Kender a scathing glance. Magic, she stated, pounding and stroking the rat. Look. She popped it back into her bag and said, "Come, go." She led them north, passing through
Before I do this, I'll be right back.
Finally, she came to a halt in a room filled with rock dust and debris. Part of the ceiling had collapsed and the floor was littered with broken tiles. The gully dwarf jabbered and pointed at something in the northeast corner of the room. Go down, she said. Tanis and Raceman walked over to inspect. They found a 4-foot wide pipe, one end sticking up out of the crumbling floor. Apparently, it had fallen through the ceiling, caving in the northeast section of the room. Raceman thrust his staff down inside the pipe and peered inside. Come, you go, Bupu said, pointing and tugging at Raceman's sleeve urgently. Bosses can't follow. That's probably true, Tanis said, all with their wings. There's not enough room to swing a sword, Sturm said proudly. I don't like it. Suddenly, everyone stopped falling. They heard the wheel creak and the chain start to screech. The companions looked at each other. Me first, Tasselhoff grinned, poking his head into the pipe. He crawled forward on his hands and knees. Are you sure I'll fit? Karen asked, staring at the opening anxiously. Don't worry, Tass's voice flowed down. It's so slick with slime you'll slip through like a greased pig. This cheerful statement did not seem to impress Karen. He continued to regard the pipe gloomily as Raceman, led by Bupu, clutched his robes around him and slid inside, his staff lightly away. Blair climbed in next. Gold moved forward, grimacing in disgust as her hands slipped in the thick, green slime. River wind slid in that way. This is insane. I hope you know that. Sturm muttered in disgust. Tanis didn't answer. He clapped Karen on the back. Turn, he said, listening to the sound of the chain moving faster and faster. Karen rolled. Getting down on his hands and knees, the big warrior crawled forward into the puddle. His sword caught on the edge. Backing out, he fumbled to readjust the sword. Then he tried again. This time his rump stuck up too far, making his back scrape along the top. Tanis planted his down, the half-elf pulled. Caravan collapsed like a wet sack with another groan. He squirmed in, head first, shoving his shield in front of him. His armor dragging along the metal pipe with a shrill, scraping sound that set Tanis's teeth on edge. The half-elf reached out and grasped the top of the pipe. Thrusting his legs in first, he began to slide in a foul-smelling slide. He twisted his head around to look back at Stern, who came last. Sanity ended when we followed Tegan into the kitchen of the Inn of the Lost Hill. He said, "True enough." The knight agreed with a sigh. Tasselhoff, enthralled by the new experience of crawling down the pipe, suddenly saw dark figures at the bottom end, scrabbling for a handle. He slipped to a stop.
Thanks, man.
The Kender whispered.
Something's coming up the pipe.
This, the mage started to grasp. The foul, moist air caught his throat. He began to cough. Trying to catch his breath, he shone the staff's light down the pipe to see who approached. Book1 took one look. "Go, Palfers," she muttered, waving her hand. She shouted, "Go back, go back." "You go up, right and live. Big bosses get mad," yelled one. "We go down. See high boat," Book1 said importantly. At this, the other gully dwarves began backing down, muttering and swearing. But Raceland couldn't move for a moment. He clutched his chest, hacking, the sound echoing alarmingly in the stillness of the narrow pipe. Book1 gazed at him anxiously, then thrust her small hand into her bag, fished around for several moments, and came up with an object that she held up to the light. She squinted at it, then sighed and shook her head. "It's not what I want," she mumbled. Tasselhoff, catching sight of a brilliant, colorful flash, crept closer. "What is that?" he asked, even though he knew the answer. Raceland, too, was staring at the object with wide, glittering eyes. Book1 shrugged. "Pretty raw," she said without interest, searching through the bag once more. "An emerald," Raceland wheezed. Book1 glanced up. "You like?" she asked Raceland. "Very much," the mage gasped. "You keep." Book1 put the jewel in the mage's hand. Then, with a cry of triumph, she brought out what she had been searching for. Task, leaning up close to see the new wonder, drew back in disgust. It was a dead, very dead, lizard. There was a piece of chewed-on leather cord tied around the lizard's stiff tail. Book1 held it toward Raceland. "You wear a round neck," she said. "Cure cough." The mage, accustomed to handling much more unpleasant objects than this, smiled at Book1 and thanked her, but declined the cure, assuring her that this cough was much improved. She looked at him dubiously, but he did seem better. The spasm had passed. After a moment, she shrugged and put the lizard back into her bag. Examining the emerald with expert eyes, stared coldly at Tasselhoff. The Kender, sighing, turned his back and continued down the pipe. Raceland slipped the stone into one of the secret inner pockets sewn into his robes. When a branch pipe joined theirs, Tass looked questioningly at the gully dwarf. Book1 hesitantly pointed south into the new pipe. Tass entered slowly. "This is steep," he gasped as he began to slide rapidly down. He tried to slow his descent, but the slime was too thick. Caraman's explosive oath, echoing down the pipe from behind him, told the Kender that his companions were having the same problem. Suddenly, Tass saw light ahead of him. The tunnel was coming to an end, but where? Tass had a vivid vision of bursting out 500 feet above nothing. But there wasn't anything he could do to stop himself. The light grew brighter, and Hasselhoff shot out the end of the pipe with a small shriek. Raceland slid out of the pipe, nearly falling on Boo-Boo, the mage, looking around, thought for an instant that he had tumbled into a fire. Great, billowing clouds of white rolled around the room. Raceland began to cough and gasp for breath. What? Flint flew out of the end of the pipe, falling on his hands and knees. He peered through the cloud. Poison? He gasped, crawling over to the mage. Raceland shook his head, but he couldn't answer. Boo-Boo clutched the mage, dragging him toward the door. Gold Moon slid out on her stomach, knocking the breath from her body. Riverwind tumbled out, twisting his body to avoid hitting Gold Moon. There was a clanging bang as Caraman's shield shot from the pipe. Caraman's spiked armor and broad girth had slowed him enough so that he was able to crawl out of the pipe. But he was bruised and battered and covered with green filth. By the time Tanis arrived, everyone was gagging in the powdery atmosphere. What in the name of the abyss? Tanis said, astonished, then promptly choked as he inhaled a lungful of the white stuff. Get out of here, he croaked. Where's that gully dwarf? Boo-Boo appeared in the doorway. She had taken Raceland out of the room and was now motioning to the others. They emerged, thankfully, into the unclouded air and slumped down to rest among the ruins of the street. Tanis hoped they weren't waiting for an army of Draconians. Suddenly, he looked up. Where's Tanis? He asked in alarm, staggering to his feet. Here I am, said a thick and miserable voice. Tanis whirled around. Hasselhoff, at least Tanis presumed it was Hasselhoff, stood before him. The kender was covered from top knot to toes in a thick, white, pasty substance. All Tanis could see of him were two brown eyes blinking out of a white mask. What happened? The half-elf asked. He had never seen anyone quite so miserable as the bedraggled kender. Hasselhoff didn't answer. He just pointed back inside. Tanis, fearing something disastrous, ran over and peered cautiously through the crumbling doorway. The white cloud had dissipated so that he could see around the room now. Over in one corner, directly opposite the pipe opening, stood a number of large, bulging sacks. Two of them had been split open, spilling a mass of white on the floor. Then Tanis understood. He put his hand over his face to hide his smile. Flour, he murmured. Chapter 19. The Broken City. Eyebolt Fudge the First. The Great. The night of the cataclysm. When the fiery mountain struck Kryn, the land split apart. The ancient slid down the face of a cliff into a vast cavern formed by the huge rents in the ground. Thus, underground, it was lost to the sight of men, and most people believed the city had vanished entirely, swallowed up by new sea. But it still existed, clinging to the rough sides of the cavern walls, spread out upon the floor of the cavern. There were ruined buildings on several different levels. The building the companions had fallen into, which Tanis assumed must have been a bakery, was on the middle level, caught by rocks and held up against the sheer cliff face. Water from underground streams flowed down the sides of the rock and ran swirling among the ruins. Tanis's gaze followed the course of the water. It ran down the middle of the cracked cobblestone street, running past other small shops and houses, where people had once lived and gone about their business. Then the city fell, but the buildings once lined the street toppled against one another, forming a crude archway of broken marble slabs above the cobblestones. Doors and broken shop windows yawned into the street. All was still and quiet, except for the noise of the dripping water. The air was heavy with the odor of decay. It weighed upon the spirit, and though the air was warmer down beneath the ground level than up above, the gloomy atmosphere chilled the blood. No one spoke. They washed the slime from their bodies and the flour from taps as best they could, then refilled their water skins. Sturm and Caravan searched the area but saw no Draconians. After a few moments of rest, the companions rose and moved on. Boop led them south, down the street, beneath the archway of ruined buildings. The street opened into a plaza. Here, the water in the streets became a river, flowing west. Follow river, Boop pointed. Tanis frowned. Hearing above the noise of the river another sound, the crashing and roaring of a great waterfall. But Boop insisted. So, the heroes edged their way around the Plaza River, occasionally plunging ankle deep in the water. Reaching the end of the street, the companions discovered the waterfall. The street dropped off into air, and the river gushed out from between broken columns to fall nearly 500 feet into the bottom of the cavern. There rested the remainder of the ruined city of Sataro. They could see by the dim light that filtered through to the cavern roof far above that the heart of the ancient city lay scattered about on the floor of the cavern in many states of decay. Some of the buildings were almost completely intact. Others, however, were nothing but rubble. A chill fog, created by the many waterfalls plunging down into the cavern, hung over the city. Most of the streets had become rivers, which combined to flow into a deep abyss to the north. Peering through the mists, the companions could see the huge chain hanging only a few hundred feet away, slightly north of their present position. They realized that the lift raised and lowered people at least 1,000 feet. Where does the high boat live? Tanis asked, looking down into the dead city below him. Who says he lives over there? Raceland gestured. In those buildings on the west side of the castle. And who lives in the reconstructed buildings right below us? Tanis asked. Bosses, Boop replied, scowling. How many bosses? One and one and one. Boop counted until she had used up all her fingers. 2, she said, not more than 2.
Still in
Which
one.
could be anything from 200 to 2,000, Sturm muttered. How do we get to see the high boat? High boat, Boop said. High boat Bud the First, the Great. How do we get to him without the bosses catching us? In answer, Boop pointed upward to the rising pot full of Draconians. Tanis looked blank, glanced at Sturm, who shrugged disgustedly. Boop sighed in exasperation and turned to Raceland, obviously considering the others incapable of understanding. Bosses go up, we go down, she said. Raceland stared at the lift through the mist. Then he nodded in understanding. The Draconians probably believe that we are trapped up there with no way to get down into the city. If most of the Draconians are up above, that would allow us to move safely below. All right, Sturm said. But how in the name of Istar do we get down? Most of us can't walk. Boop spread her hands. Fines, she said. Seeing everyone's look of confusion, the dummy dwarf stumped over to the edge of the waterfall and pointed down. Thick green vines hung over the edge of the rocky cliff like giant snakes. The leaves on the vines were torn, tattered and in some places stripped off entirely. But the vines themselves appeared thick and tough, even if they were slippery. Gold Moon, unusually pale, crept toward the edge, peered over, and backed away hurriedly. It was a 500-foot drop straight down to a rubble-strewn cobblestone street. Riverwind put his arm around her, comforting. "I've climbed worse," Caravan said complacently. "Well, I don't like it," said Flint. "But anything's better than sliding down a sewer." Grabbing hold of the vine, he swung himself over the ledge and began to hitch slowly down, hand over hand. "It's not bad," he shouted up. Tasselhoff slid down a vine after Flint, traveling rapidly and with such skill that he received a grunt of approbation from Boo-Boo. The gully dwarf turned to look at Raceland, pointing at his long, flowing robes and frowning. The mage smiled at her reassuringly. Standing on the edge of the cliff, he said, "Feather." The crystal ball on top of his staff flared, and Raceland leaped off the edge of the cliff, disappearing into the mist below. Boo-Boo shrieked. Tanis caught her, fearing the adoring gully dwarf might throw herself over. "He'll be fine," the half-elf assured her, feeling a flash of pity when he saw the look of genuine anguish on her face. "He is major," he said. "Magic, you know?" Boo-Boo obviously did not know because she stared at Tanis suspiciously, threw her bag around her neck, grabbed hold of a vine, and began scrabbling down the slippery rock. The rest of the companions were preparing to follow when Gold Moon whispered brokenly, "I can't." Riverwind took her hands. "Kantoka," he said softly. "It will be all right. You heard what the dwarf said. Just don't look down." Gold Moon shook her head, her chin quivering. "There must be another way," she said stubbornly. "We will search for it." "What's the problem?" Tanis asked. "We should hurry." "She's afraid of heights," Riverwind said. Gold Moon shoved him away. "How dare you tell him that?" she shouted, her face flushed with anger. Riverwind stared at her coldly. "Why not?" he said, his voice grating. "He's not your subject. You can let him know you're human, that you have human frailties. There's only one subject to impress now, Chieftain, and that is me." If Riverwind had stabbed her, he could have inflicted no more terrible pain. The color drained from Gold Moon's lips. Her eyes grew wide and staring, like the eyes of a corpse. "Please secure the staff on my back," she said to Tanis. Gold Moon. "He didn't mean," he began. "Do as I command." She ordered curtly, her blue eyes blazing in anger. Tanis, sighing, tied the staff to her back with a length of rope. Gold Moon did not even glance at Riverwind. When the staff was fastened tightly, she started toward the edge of the cliff. Sturm jumped in front of her. "Allow me to go down the vine ahead of you," he said. "If you slip..." "If I slip and fall, you'd fall with me. The only thing we'd accomplish would be to die together," she snapped. Leaning down, she took a firm grip on the vine and swung herself over the edge. Almost immediately, her sweating hands slipped. Tanis's breath caught in his throat. Sturm lunged forward, though he knew there wasn't anything he could do. Riverwind stood watching, not a sign of emotion on his face. Gold Moon clutched frantically at the vines and thick leaves. She caught hold and clung to them tightly, unable to breathe, unwilling to move. She pressed her face against the wet leaves, shuddering, her eyes closed to block out the sight of the terrifying drop to the ground below. Sturm went over the edge and climbed down to her. "Leave me alone." Gold Moon said to him through clenched teeth. She drew a trembling breath, cast a proud, defiant glance at Riverwind, then began to lower herself down the vine. Sturm stayed near her, keeping an eye on her, as he skillfully climbed down the cliff face. Tanis, standing next to Riverwind, wanted to say something to the plainsman, but feared to do more harm. Saying nothing, therefore, he went over the edge. Riverwind followed silently. The half-elf found the climb easy, though he slipped the last few feet, landing in an inch of water. Raceland, he noticed, was shivering with the cold, his cough worsening in the damp air. Several gully dwarves stood around the mage, staring at him with admiring eyes. Tanis wondered how long the charm spell would last. Gold Moon leaned against the wall, shaking. She did not look at Riverwind as he reached the ground and moved away from her, his face still expressionless. "Where are we?" Tanis shouted above the noise of the waterfall. The mist was so thick he couldn't see anything except broken columns, overgrown with vines and fungus. "Great Plaza that way." Boo urgently jabbed her grubby finger toward the west. "Come, you follow. Go see High Bulb." She started off. Tanis reached out his hand and caught hold of her, dragging her to a stop. She glared at him, deeply offended. The half-elf removed his hand. "Please, just listen a moment. What about the dragon? Where's the dragon?"
I was gone already.
Boo-Poo's eyes widened. "You want dragon?" she asked. "No," yelled Tanis. "We don't want the dragon, but we need to know if the dragon comes into this part of the city." He felt Sturm's hand on his shoulder and gave up. "Never mind," he said wearily. "Go on." Boo regarded Raceland with deep sympathy for having to put up with these insane people. Then she took the mage's hand and trotted off down the street to the west, the other gully dwarves trailing along behind. Half deafened by the thundering noise of the waterfall, the companions waited after, glancing about them uneasily. Dark windows loomed above them. Dark doorways threatened. At each moment, they expected scaly, armored draconians to appear. But the gully dwarves did not seem concerned. They sloshed along the street, keeping as close to Raceland as possible, and jabbering in their uncouth language. Eventually, the sounds of the waterfall faded in the distance. The mist continued to swirl around them, however, and the silence of the dead city was oppressive. Dark water gushed and gurgled past their feet along the cobblestone riverbed. Suddenly, the buildings came to an end, and the street opened into a huge, circular plaza. Through the water, they could see the remnants in the plaza of flagstone paving in an intricate sunburst design. In the center of the plaza, the river was joined by another stream, rushing in from the north. They formed a small whirlpool as the waters met and swirled, before joining and continuing west between another group of tumble-down buildings. Here, light streamed into the plaza from a crack in the cavern roof, hundreds of feet above, illuminating the ghostly mists dancing off the surface of the water whenever the mists parted. "Other side, Great Plaza," Boo pointed. The companions came to a halt in the shadows of the ruined buildings. All of them had the same thought. The plaza was over 100 feet across, without a scrap of shelter. Once they ventured out, there would be no hiding. Boo, trotting along without concern, suddenly realized no one was following her except other gully dwarves. She looked back, irritated at the delay. "You come! How about this way?" "Look!" Gold Moon grasped Tanis's arm. On the other side of the great flagstone plaza were great, tall marble columns that supported a stone roof. The columns were cracked and shattered, letting the roof sag. The mists parted, and Tanis caught a glimpse of a courtyard behind the columns. Dark forms of tall, domed buildings were visible beyond the courtyard. Then the mists closed around them. Though now sunk into degradation and ruin, this structure must have once been the most magnificent in Zaxxaro. The Royal Palace, Raceland confirmed, coughing. Shh. Gold Moon shook Tanis's arm. Can't you see? No, wait. The mists flowed in front of the pillars. For a moment, the companions could not see anything. Then the fog swirled away. The companions shrank back into the dark doorway. The gully dwarves came to a skidding halt in the plaza and, whirling around, raced back to cower behind Raceland. Book1 peered at Tanis from under the mage's sleeve. That dragon, she said. You won't? It was the dragon. Sleek and shining black, her leathery wings folded at her side, Kisan slithered out from under the roof, ducking her head to fit beneath the sagging stone facade. Her clawed front feet clicked on the marble stairs as she stopped and stared into the floating mist with her bright red eyes. Her back legs and heavy reptilian tail were not visible, the dragon's body extending 30 feet or more back into the courtyard. A cringing Draconian walked beside her, the two apparently deep in conversation. Kisan was angry. The Draconian had brought her disturbing news. It was impossible that any of the strangers could have survived her attack at the well. But now, the captain of her guard reported strangers in the city. Strangers who attacked her forces with skill and daring. Strangers bearing a brown staff whose description was known to every Draconian serving in this part of the Ancelan continent. I cannot believe this report. None could have escaped me. Kisan's voice was soft, almost hurried. Yet the Draconian trembled as he heard it. The staff was not with them. I would have sensed its presence. You say these intruders are still about in the upper chambers, are you certain? The Draconian gulped and nodded. There is no way down, Royal One, except the lift. There are other ways, you lizard. Kisan sneered. These miserable gully dwarves crawl around the place like parasites. The intruders have the staff, and they are trying to get down into the city. That means only one thing. They are after the discs. How could they have learned of them? The dragon snaked her head around and up and down as if she could see those who threatened her plans through the blinding mists, but the mists swirled past, thicker than ever. Kisan snarled in irritation. The staff! That miserable staff! Ermenard should have foreseen this with those clerical powers it touts so highly. Then it could have been destroyed. But no, he is busy with his war, while I must rot here in this dank tomb of a city. Kisan gnawed a talon as she pondered. You could destroy the discs, the Draconian suggested, greatly daring. Oh, don't you think we've tried? Kisan muttered. She lifted her head. No, it is far too dangerous to stay here longer. If these intruders know the secret, others must also. The discs should be removed to a safe place. Inform Lord Verminar that I am leaving Zaxxaro. I will join him in Pax Tharkas, and I will bring the intruders with me for questioning. Inform Lord Verminar, the Draconian asked, shop. Very well, Kisan responded sarcastically. If you insist on the charade, ask my lord's permission. I suppose you have sent most of the troops up to the top. Yes, royal one. The Draconian bowed. Kisan considered the matter. Perhaps you are not such an idiot after all, she mused. I can handle things below. Concentrate your search in the upper parts of the city. When you find these intruders, bring them straight to me. Do not hurt them any more than necessary to subdue them, and be careful of that staff. The Draconian fell to its knees before the dragon, who sniffed in their vision and crept back into the dark shadows out of which she had come. The Draconian ran down the stairs where it was joined by several more creatures who appeared out of the mist. After a brief, muffled exchange in their own language, the Draconians started up the North Street. They walked nonchalantly, laughing at some private joke, and soon vanished into the mist. They're not worried, are they? Sturm said. No. Tanis agreed grimly. They think they Let's face it, Tanis. They're right, Sturm said. This plan we've been discussing has one major flaw. If we sneak in without the dragon knowing, and if we get risks, we still have to get out of this godforsaken city with Draconians crawling all over the upper levels. I asked you before, and I'll ask you now, Tanis said. Have you got a better plan? Caraman said roughly. No disrespect, Tanis, but we all know how you feel about fighting. The big man gestured toward the palace. That's obviously where the dragon lives. Let's lure it out as we plan. Only this time we'll fight it, not creep around its lair like thieves. When the dragon's disposed of, then we can get the discs. My dear brother, Raceland whispered, your strength lies in your soul, not in your mind. Tanis is wise. As the knight said, when we started on this adventure, you would do well to pay attention to it. What do you know of dragons, my brother? You have seen the effects of its deadly breath. Raceland was overcome by a fit of coughing. He dragged a soft cloth out from the sleeve of his robe. Tanis saw that the cloth was stained with blood. After a moment, Raceland continued. You could defend yourself against that, perhaps, and against the sharp claws and fangs and the slashing tail, which can knock down those pillars. But what will you use, dear brother, against her magic? Dragons are the most ancient of magic users. She could charm you, as I have charmed my little friend. She could put you to sleep with a word, then murder you while you dream. All right, Caraman muttered, chagrined. I didn't know any of that. Damn it, who does know anything about these creatures? There is much lore on the dragons in Solamnia, Sturm said softly. He wants to fight the dragon too, Tanis realized. He is thinking of Huma, the perfect knight, called Dragonbane. Boo-Boo tugged on Raceland's robe. Come, you go. No more bosses, no more dragon. She and the other gully dwarves started splashing across the flagstone plaza. Well, Tanis said, looking at the two warriors. It seems we have no choice. Sturm said stiffly. We do not face the enemy. We hide behind gully dwarves. Sooner or later a time must come when we face these monsters. He spun on his heel and walked off, his back straight, his mustaches bristling. The companions followed. Maybe we're worrying needlessly. Tanis scratched his beard, glancing back at the palace that was now obscured by the mist. Perhaps this is the only dragon left in Kree, one that survived the age of dreams. Raceland's lips twisted. Remember the stars, Tanis. he murmured. The Queen of Darkness has returned. Recall the words of the canticle. Swarm of her shrieking hosts. Her hosts were dragons, according to the ancient ones. She has returned, and her hosts have come. This way! Boo-Boo clutched at Raceland, pointing down a street branching off to the north. This home! At least it's dry, Flint grumbled. Turning right, they left the river behind them. Mist closed in around the companions as they entered another nest of ruined buildings. This section of town must have been the poor part of the city of Zatzaro, even in its glory days. The buildings were in the last stages of decay and collapse. The gully dwarves began whooping and hollering as they ran down the street. Sturm looked at Tanis in alarm at the noise. Can't you get them to be quiet? Tanis asked Boo-Poo. So the Draconians, bosses, won't find us. Who? She shrugged. No bosses. They not come here, afraid of the great Harpo. Tanis had his doubts about that, but glancing around, he couldn't see any signs of the Draconians. From what he had observed, the lizard-like men seemed to lead a well-ordered, militaristic life. By contrast, the streets in this part of town were cluttered with trash and filth. The disreputable buildings erupted with gully dwarves. Males, females, and dirty, ragged children stared at them curiously as they walked down the street. Boo-Poo and the other spellbound gully dwarves swarmed around Raceland, practically carrying him. The Draconians were undeniably smart, Tanis thought. They allowed their slaves to live their private lives in peace, so long as they didn't stir up trouble. A good idea, considering that gully dwarves outnumbered Draconians about 10 to 1. Though they were basically cowards, gully dwarves had a reputation as very nasty fighters when backed into a corner. Boo-Poo brought the group to a halt in front of one of the darkest, dingiest, filthiest alleys Tanis had ever seen. A foul mist flowed out from them. The buildings leaned over, holding each other up like drunks stumbling out of a tavern. As he watched, small, dark creatures skittered out of the alley, and gully dwarf children began chasing after them. "Dinner!" shrieked one, smacking his lips. "Those are rats!" Gold Moon cried in horror. "Do we have to go in there?" Sturm growled, staring at the tottering buildings. "The smell alone is enough to knock a troll dead," Caraman added. "And I'd rather die under the dragon's claw than have a gully dwarf hovel fall on top of me." Boo-Poo gestured down the alley. "The Harpo," she said, pointing to the most dilapidated building on the block. "Stay here and keep watch if you want," Tanis told Sturm. "I'll go talk with the Harpo." "No," the knight scowled, gesturing the half into the alley. "We're in this together." The alley ran several hundred feet to the east, then it twisted north and came suddenly to a dead end. Ahead of them was a decaying brick wall, and no way out. Their return was blocked by gully dwarves who had run in after them. "Ambush!" Sturm hissed and drew his sword. Caraman began to rumble deep in his throat. The gully dwarves, seeing the flash of cold steel, panicked. Falling all over themselves and each other, they whirled and fled back down the alley. Boo-Poo glared at Sturm and Caraman in disgust. She turned to Raceland. "You make them stop," she demanded, pointing to the warriors, "or I not take the Harpo." "Put your sword away, knight," Raceland hissed, "unless you think you've found a foe worthy of your attention." Sturm glowered at Raceland, and for a moment Tanis thought he might attack the mage. But then the knight thrust his sword away. "I wish I knew what your game was, magician," Sturm said coldly. You were so eager to come to this city even before we knew about the discs. Why? What are you after? Raceland did not reply. He stared at the night malevolently with his strange golden eyes, then turned to Boop. They will trouble you no further, little one, he whispered. Boop looked around to make certain they were the cow. Then she walked forward and knocked twice on the wall with her bloody fist. Secret, she said importantly. 2 knocks answered Boop's knock. That signal, she said. 3 knocks, now they let in. But she only knocked twice, Tass began, giggling. Boop glared at him. Shh. Tanis nudged the kender. Nothing happened. Boop, frowning, knocked twice more. 2 knocks answered. She waited. Caroline, his eyes on the alley opening, began moving restlessly from one foot to the other. Boop knocked twice again. 2 knocks answered. Finally, Boop yelled at the wall. I knock secret code knock, you let in. Secret knock 5 knocks, answered a muffled voice. I knock 5 knocks, Boop stated angrily. You let in. You knock 6 knocks. I count 8 knocks, argued another voice. Boop suddenly pushed on the wall with both hands. It opened easily. She peered inside. I knocked 4 knocks. You let in, she said, raising a clenched fist. All right, the voice grumbled. Boop shut the door, knocked twice. Tanis, hoping to avoid any more incidents and delays, glared at the kender, who was writhing with suppressed laughter. The door swung open. Again. You come in, the guard said sourly, but that's not 4 knocks. He whispered to Boop loudly. She ignored him as she swept disdainfully past him, dragging her bag along the floor. We see Highball, she announced. You take this lot to Highball? One of the guards gasped, staring at the giant Caroline and the tall Riverwind with wide eyes. His companion began backing up. See Highball, Boop said proudly. The gully, never taking his eyes off the formidable-looking group, backed into a stinking, filthy hallway. Then, broke into a run. He began shouting at the top of his lungs. An army! An army has broken in! They could hear his shouts echo down the hallway. Bah! Boop sniffed. Go, Funger spawn. Come, see Highball. She started down the hallway, clutching her bag to her chest. The companions could still hear the shouts of the gully dwarf echoing down the corridor. An army! An army of giants! Save the Highball! The great Highball, Fudge the First, was a gully dwarf among gully dwarfs. He was almost intelligent, rumored to be fabulously wealthy, and a notorious coward. The Bulbs had long been the elite clan of Zakzaroth, or as they called it, ever since No Bulb fell down a shaft one night in a drunken stupor and discovered the city. Upon sobering up the next morning, he claimed it for his clan. The Bulbs promptly moved in and, in later years, graciously allowed the clans Slud and Gulp to occupy the city as well. Life was good in the ruined city, by Gully Dwarf standards anyway. The outside world left them alone, since the outside world hadn't the foggiest notion they were there, and wouldn't have cared if they did. The Bulbs had no trouble maintaining their dominance over the other clans, mostly because it was a Bulb, Glungu, with a scientific turn of mind. Certain jealous members of the whispered that his mother had been a gnome, who developed the lift, putting to use the 2 enormous iron pots used by the city's former residents for rendering lard. The lift enabled the gully dwarves to extend their scavenging activities to the jungle above the sunken city, greatly improving their standard of living. Glungu Bulk, became a hero and was proclaimed High Bulk by unanimous decision. The chieftainship of the clans had remained in the Bulk family ever since. The years passed, and then, suddenly, the outside world took an interest in Zak-Saroth. The arrival of the dragon and the Draconians put a sad crimp on the Gully Dwarf lifestyle. The Draconians had initially intended to wipe out the filthy little nuisances, but the Gully Dwarves, led by the Great Fudge, had cringed and cowered and whimpered and wailed and prostrated themselves so abjectly that the Draconians were merciful and simply enslaved them. So it was that the Gully Dwarves, for the first time in several hundred years of living in Zak-Saroth, were forced to work. The Draconians repaired buildings, put things into military order, and generally made life miserable for the Gully Dwarves, who had to cook and clean and repair things. Needless to say, the Great Fudge was not pleased with this state of affairs. He spent long hours thinking up ways to remove the dragon. He knew the location of the dragon's lair, of course, and had even discovered a secret route leading there. He had actually sneaked in once when the dragon was away. Fudge had been awestruck by the vast amount of pretty rocks and shining coins gathered in the huge underground.
Hey, just chilling. How you doing?
He knew that folk in the outside world coveted these pretty
Every hope you're doing good, bro.
vast amounts of colorful and gaudy cloth. Fudge had a weakness for fine clothes. In return, on the spot, the High Bulk drew up a map so he wouldn't forget how to get back to the treasure.
Oh, it's all good. Just chilling. Definitely glad you're doing all right, though.
Fudge dreamed of this wealth for months afterward, but he never found another opportunity to return.
Oh, it hasn't been too bad. I won off a $10 raffle ticket I bought. I won let me get it.
If only the
I
dragon
won
would
the
be permanently, he thought, or if some hero would come along
Dr.
and
Dabber
stick a
switch.
sword into him. These were the High Bulk's fondest dreams, and this was the state of affairs when the Great Fudge
So it hasn't been too bad.
proclaimed.
Spent $10 on the raffle ticket.
Thus it came to pass that when
Okay, give me 1 second. Let me go to the bathroom real quick, and when I get back, I'll hit it.
High Bulk Fudge the First began to believe that dreams could come true. And so you're here to kill the dragon, said the great High Bulk Fudge the First to Tanis half-elven. No, Tanis said patiently. We're not. The companions stood in the court of the Agar before the throne of a gully dwarf Book1 had introduced as the Great High Bulk. Book1 kept an eye on the companions as they entered the throne room, eagerly anticipating their looks of stunned awe. Book1 was not disappointed. The looks on the companions' faces as they entered might well be described as stunned. The city of Zak-Saroth had been stripped of its finery by the early Bulks, who used it to decorate the throne room of their lord. Following the philosophy that if 1 yard of gold cloth is good, 40 yards is better, and totally uninhibited
They
by
got the little
good
carb
taste,
cap.
the Gully Dwarves turned the throne room of the Great High Bulk into a masterpiece of confusion. Heavy, frayed gold cloth swirled and draped every available inch of wall space. Huge tapestries hung from the ceiling, some of them upside down. The tapestries must have once been beautiful, delicate colored threads blending to show scenes of city life or portray stories of legends from the past. But the Gully
Has some
Dwarves
cool lights on
opened
it.
to liven them up, painted over the cloth in garish.
Yeah, it has different light, like you can leave it a solid color or
Sam was shocked to the
how this one is.
when confronted by a bright red human battling a purple
But I got to
beneath an emerald
load this bucket.
graceful, nude statues, standing in all the wrong places.
It has like,
The room as well. These two, the gully dwarves had
I
enhanced.
think like 15,
Pure white marble, drab,
20 different
they painted
color
the
lights
statue
or
with enough
light
detail
spectrums, should I say.
detail that
And it has
with an embarrassed glance at Gold Moon,
25
kept his eye
temp
on
settings. It has all kinds of
the
other
ball.
extra goodies
The
that's on it.
problems maintained in their
Plus,
serious mean when ushered into this
I can
gallery
smoke
of
wax out of it,
horrors.
or just flip the switch on the button,
Tasselhoff was immediately
and I could
overcome by the giggles so severely
smoke
that
flower.
Tanis was forced to send the Kender back to the waiting place.
Pretty
outside
much.
the fort to
I got it for
compose himself.
because last
The
weekend
rest of the group,
there was a tattoo convention,
with the exception of
and at the convention,
his hand
one of the
remembering his battle axe,
local smoke
with
shops,
trace of a smile on his face.
Cloud9 smoke shop,
The dwarf had laid
was
his
doing
hand
a,
on Tanis'
they did a
arm
raffle,
when they entered the fort.
$10 a ticket.
Don't be
And on the last day of the convention, because the convention was
These creatures can be treacherous.
Friday, Saturday, and Sunday.
The high bolt was somewhat
So on the last day of the convention,
especially at the
they were
sight
going to
of
draw
the
for it.
But Raceland made a few well-chosen
And,
remarks that considerably
Yeah,
modified
I bought it,
assured
the ticket, just to,
disappointment.
well, mainly help the smoke shop out because it is a local business.
Explained that they did not want to
And
cause
just
trouble. They simply
without
wanted
the
to be an
anticipation
object
of winning. I wasn't expecting to win. Then the
preferably
last day,
without disturbing the
the convention, they did a drawing, and I got a phone call
This, of course, didn't
from them
predict
saying,
Project
like asking if this was me and whatnot, and that I won.
Cocooned in
Took my
he leaned back
my
with a
ticket, and
boldly thrown and
I won this and this in the store because it's the, so you can see it, Dr. Dabber switch. Cause see right there for wax, for flour, you just flip it. Like I say, I flip it in the middle. That pretty much turns it off. But you can flip it that way. Oh, $60. I don't know, bro. Here in the stores, they're priced like almost $400. The Dr. Dabber switch. At least around here in the shops, the Dr. Dabber switch is about over $300.
Glanced at the mage in disgust. We will bring the pretty rocks.
Yeah, I can even show you on the website.
Help us.
Because on the website, you get them. If you go to Dr. Dabber, the actual Dr. Dabber website, they're like almost $400. I'm getting there. I barely loaded the cap in there because I gotta
trying to subdue his glee and
make sure my temps are what it's supposed to be. Okay.
At last, they seem
And now,
to be getting somewhere. Pooh-pooh. He indicated the female gully dwarf clinging to Raceland's sleeve. Told us that you were the only one in the city who could lead us to the dragon's lair. Lead? The great god no, lead. Great high bulk, not expendable. People need me. No. I didn't mean lead.
What can I say? It was at least to me, it was a early birthday present because I won this on Sunday, and then on Wednesday, my birthday was.
The sleeve of his robe. Should say so in first place. Map. Yes. I send for map. Meantime, you eat. Guests of the high boat. Guards take to mess hall. No, thank you.
And what's cool about it, it has
Unable to look at the others.
a
They
self-cleaning.
had passed the gully dwarf mess hall on their way to see the high boat. The smell alone had been enough to ruin even Caravan's appetite. We have our own food. Tanis continued. We would like some time to ourselves to rest and discuss our plans further. Certainly. The highball scooted forward to the front of the throne. Two of his guards came over to help him down since his feet didn't touch the floor.
It was Wednesday. It was on the 6th. Oh, definitely a major come up.
Tanis glanced swiftly at the gully door.
Because we thought it might have been like just the stores around here being that price, but no. On the actual website, watch, let's see if I can pull it up.
This gully dwarf was known for food. Tanis began to wish he had talked more with Flynn. Our plans are hardly formed yet, Your Majesty, the half-elf said. The great highball knew better. Long ago, he had drilled a hole through the wall of the room known as waiting place, so that he could eavesdrop on his subjects as they waited for an audience with him, discovering what they intended to bother him about in advance. Thus, he knew a great deal about the companion's plans already, so he let the matter drop. The use of the term, Your Majesty, may have had something to do with it.
It's like you had a good angle at it.
I'd never heard anything quite so suitable.
374.
Fudge repeated.
If I could turn that.
He poked
There we go.
one of his guards in the back. You remember, from now on, say, Your Majesty. Yes, Your Majesty, the gully dwarf stuttered. The great Fudge waved his filthy hand graciously, and the companions bowed their way out. Highball Fudge the First stood for a moment beside his throne, smiling in what he considered a charming manner, until his guests were gone. Then his expression changed, transforming.
And I got it for a $10 raffle ticket.
Around him in eager anticipation. You, he said to one, go to quarters, bring Matt, give to fools in next room. The guard saluted and ran off. The other guard remained close, waiting in open-mouthed expectation. Fudge glanced around, then drew the guard even nearer, considering exactly how to phrase his next command. He needed some good, and if he had to create his own out of whatever scum came along, then he would do so. If they died, it was no great loss. If they succeeded in
this is what
so much the better.
I had to take out and
gully dwarves
load.
what was to them more precious than all the pretty rocks in Prim.
Right. I see. I loaded then had to put it back in there.
And so, enough of this nonsense about sneaking around.
And then when I'm done, just
Fudge leaned over and whispered in the guard's ear. You go to
Dragonlance.
Give her best regard to His Majesty, Highball Fudge the First, and tell her. Chapter 20. The Highbolt's Map.
And I can actually get either a replacement just like this, or they have other ones that you could get, like real fancy ones, like recycler types.
I agree, Tanis said quietly. But what choice do we have? We've agreed to bring him the treasure. He has everything to lose and nothing to gain.
Whoa.
They sat on the floor of a waiting place, a filthy antechamber outside the throne. The decorations in this room were just as vulgar as in the court. The companions were nervous and tense, speaking little and forcing themselves to eat. Raceland refused food. Curled up on the floor,
that was a close one.
He prepared and drank down the strange herbal mixture that eased his cough. Then he wrapped himself in his robes and stretched out, eyes closed, on the floor. Boo-Poo sat curled up next to him, munching on something from her lap. Caramel, going over to check on his brother, was horrified to see a tail disappear into her mouth with a slurp. Riverwind sat by himself, He did not take part in the hushed conversation as the friends went over their plans once again. The plainsman stared moodily at the floor. When he felt a light touch on his arm, he didn't even lift his head. Gold Moon, her face pale, knelt beside him. She tried to speak, failed,
Let's see.
then cleared her throat.
It's a little ceramic bowl.
She said firmly in their language. Is that a command?
I just put a little bit in there, drop it in the
Yes.
main part of it,
She
and
answered, barely
push a button.
Riverwind rose to his feet and walked over to stand in front of a garish tapestry. He did not look at Gold Moon or even speak to her. His face was drawn into a stern mask, but underneath, Gold Moon could see the searing pain in his soul. She gently laid her hand on his arm. Forgive me, she said softly. Riverwind regarded her in astonishment. She stood before him, her head bowed, an almost childlike shame on her face. He reached out to stroke the silver gold hair of the one he loved more than life itself.
Right, I'm happy with
Gold Moon
it.
trembled at his touch, and his heart ached.
Definitely could go through
Moving his hand from her head to her neck.
my wax a lot quicker than I normally
Threw the
do.
beloved head to his
Because
chest,
normally I
and
use
then suddenly clasped
this.
her in his arms.
And now with that,
I've never
yeah,
heard you say those words before, she said,
might be going through it a little
smiling to
quicker.
herself, knowing she could not see him. I have never said them, she gulped, her cheek pressed against his leather shirt.
I can't complain winning it with
I am sorry that I
just
can
spending
send
$10.
home to Chieftain's daughter and not Gold Moon. But I've been so afraid. Now, he whispered, I am the one who should ask forgiveness. He raised his hand to wipe away her tears. I didn't realize what you had gone through. All I could think of was myself and the dangers I faced. I wish you had told me, heart's dearest. I wish you had asked, she replied, looking up at him earnestly. I have been chieftain's daughter so long. It is the only thing I know how to do. It is my strength. It gives me courage when I'm frightened. I don't think I can let go.
Oh, did I use it? Yeah, my brothers hit it with me,
He
but
smiled at her, smoothing
it'll probably only be certain people just because the price tag that it has.
Do you remember that the games held in your honor?
Because the price tag, I can't replace that.
She said.
That's more money than
You acknowledged my father's leadership, but denied that I was a goddess.
I could get hold of at one time.
Did not make gods of other men. Her eyes looked back so many years.
Oh, I mainly get to keep it just for myself, but I might let some other people hit it,
He recalled.
depending who they are.
Your beauty was a blessing, he said. I needed no help. You wanted me thrown out of the games. Gold Moon smiled sadly. You thought I was angry because you had shamed me before the people, but that was not so. No. What was it then, Chieftain's daughter? Her face flushed a dusky rose, but she lifted her clear blue eyes.
Well, it's definitely gonna be mainly for me,
because I knew when I saw you.
because only very few people is gonna be able to hit it.
That I had lost part of myself, and that until you claimed it, I would never be whole again. For reply, the plainsman pressed her to him, kissing her hair gently. Riverwind, she said, swallow. Chieftain's daughter is still here. I don't think she can ever leave. But you must know that Gold Moon is underneath, and if this journey ever ends, and we come to peace at last, then Gold Moon will be yours forever, and we will banish Chieftain's daughter to the winds. A thump at the high bulb's door caused everyone to start nervously as a gully dwarf stumbled into the room. "Ma'am," he said, thrusting a crumpled piece of paper at Tanis. "Thank you," said the half-elf gravely, "and extend our thanks to the high bulb." "His Majesty the high bulb," the guard corrected with an anxious glance toward a tapestry-covered wall. Bobbing clumsily, he backed into the high bulb's quarters. Tanis spread the map flat. Everyone gathered around him. Even Flint.
Yeah, because if someone breaks that, I might be
snorted
a little bit more upset than normally would at any other piece I have.
Laughed ruefully. "We might have expected it. I wonder if this great fudge remembers where the big secret room is." "Of course not." Raceland sat up, opening his strange golden eyes and peering at them through half-closed lids. "That is why he has never returned for the treasure. However, there is one among us who knows where..."
Oh, it definitely hits pretty good.
Everyone followed the mage's gaze.
I'm definitely happy with it.
Back at them defiantly. "You right, I know," she said, sulking. "I know secret place. I go there, find pretty rocks, but don't tell High Bulb." "Will you tell us?" Tanis asked. Book1 looked at Raceland. He nodded. "I tell," she mumbled. "Give map." Raceland, seeing the others engrossed in looking at the map, beckoned to his brother. "Is the plan still the same?" the mage whispered. "Yes." Caraman frowned.
Oh, yeah, pretty much. I still use my nectar collector just because it saves me on wax.
Then he added more gently, "I will be in no danger, I assure you." He laid his hand on his twin's arm and drew him close. "Besides," the mage glanced around, "there is something you must do for me, my brother. Something you must bring me from the dragon's lair." Raceland's touch was unusually hot. His eyes burned. Caraman uneasily started to pull back, seeing something in his brother he hadn't seen since the Towers of High Sorcery.
Make sure I don't spill none.
Clutched at him. "What is it?" Caraman asked, reluctantly. "The spell book," Raceland whispered. "So that is why you wanted to come to Zaktsarov," said Caraman. "You knew this spell book would be here. I read about it years ago. I knew it had been in Zaktsarov, prior to the catechism, or of the Order. But we assumed it had been destroyed in the city. When I found out Zaktsarov had escaped destruction, I realized that I think a chunk of the book had survived. How do you know it's in the dragon's lair?" "I don't. I am merely surmising. To magic users, this book is Zaktsarov's greatest treasure. You may be certain that if the dragon found it, she is using it. You want me to get it. For you." Caraman said slowly. "What does it look like?" "Like my spellbook, of course. Except the bone-white parchment is bound in night blue leather with runes of silver stamped on the front. It will feel deathly cold to the touch." "What do the runes say?" "You do not want to know," Raceland whispered. "Whose book was it?" Caraman asked suspiciously. Raceland fell silent, his golden eyes abstracted, as if he were searching inwardly, trying to remember something forgotten. "You have never heard of him, my brother," he said finally, in a whisper that forced Caraman to lean closer. "Yet, he was one of the greatest of my order. His name was Fistandantos." "The way you described the spellbook..." Caraman hesitated, fearing what Raceland would reply. He swallowed and started over. "This Fistandantos, did he wear the black robes?" He could not meet his brother's piercing gaze. "Ask me no more," Raceland hissed. You are as bad as the others. How can any of you understand me? Seeing his twins look of pain, the mage sighed. Trust me, Carol. It is not a particularly powerful spellbook. One of the mage's early books, in fact. One he had when he was very young indeed. Raceland murmured, staring far off. Then he blinked and said more briskly, "But it will be valuable to me nonetheless. You must get it. You must." He started to cough. "Sure, Race," Caraman promised, soothing his brother. "Don't get worked up. I'll find it." "Good, Caraman. Excellent, Caraman," Raceland whispered when he could not speak. He sank back into the corner and closed his eyes. "Now let me rest. I must be ready." Caraman stood up, looked at his brother.
That's what I figured too.
Nearly fell over.
Just chilling, that's pretty much all I need.
Gazing up at him suspiciously with wide eyes. What was all that about? Sturm asked gruffly as Caraman returned to the group. "Oh, nothing," the big man mumbled, flushing guiltily. Sturm cast an alarmed glance at Tanis. "What is it, Caraman?" Tanis asked, putting the rolled map in his belt and facing the warrior. "Anything wrong?" "No," Caraman stuttered. "It's nothing. I tried to get Raceland to let me go with him. He said I'd just be in the way." Tanis studied Caraman. He knew the big man was telling the truth, but Tanis also knew the warrior wasn't telling all the truth. Caraman would cheerfully shed the last drop of his blood for any member of the company. But Tanis suspected he would betray them all at Raceland's command. The giant looked at Tanis, silently begging him to ask no more questions. "He's right, you know, Caraman," Tanis said finally, clapping the big man on the arm. "Raceland won't be in danger. Book1 will be with him. She'll bring him back here to hide. He's just got to conjure up some of his fancy pyrotechnics, create a diversion to draw the dragon away from her lair. He'll be long gone by the time she gets there." "Sure, I know that," said Caraman, forcing a chuckle. "You need me anyway." "We do," Tanis said seriously. "Now, is everyone ready?" Silently, grimly, they stood up. Raceland rose and came forward, hood over his face, hands folded in his robes. There was an aura around the mage, indefinable yet frightening. The aura of power, derived and created from within. Tanis cleared his throat. "We'll give you a 500 count," Tanis said to Raceland. "Then we'll start. The secret place marked on the map is a trapdoor located in a building not far from here, according to your little friend. It leads beneath the city to a tunnel that comes up under the dragon's lair, near where we saw her today. Create your diversion in the plaza, then come back here. We'll meet here, give the high bulk his treasure, and lie low until night. When it's dark, we'll escape." "I understand," Raceland said calmly. "Wish I did," Tanis thought bitterly. "Wish I understood what was going on. But the half-elf said nothing. "We go now?" asked Book, looking at Tanis anxiously. "We go now," Tanis said. Raceland crept from the shadowy alley and moved swiftly down the street to the south. He saw no signs of life. It was as if all the colors...
1 second, I'll be right back.
He found this thought disturbing and kept to the shadows. The frail mage could move silently if there was need. He only hoped he could control his cough. The pain and congestion in his chest had eased when he drank the herbal mixture, whose recipe had been given him by Parsalian. A kind of apology from the great sorcerer for the trauma the young mage had endured. But the mixture's effect would soon wear off. Book1 peered out from behind his robes, her beady black eyes squinting down the street leading east to the great plaza.
No one.
She said, and tugged on the mage's robe.
We go now.
No one, thought Raceland, worried. It didn't make sense. Where were the crowds of gully dwarves? He had the feeling something had gone wrong, but there wasn't time to turn back. Tanis and the others were on their way to the secret tunnel entrance. The mage smiled bitterly. What a fool's quest this was turning out to be. They would probably all die in this wretched city. Book1 tugged on his robe again. Shrugging, he cast his hood over his head and, together, he and the gully dwarf flitted down the mist-shrouded street. Two armor-clad figures detached themselves from the dark door and slunk quickly after Raceland and Book1. This is the place, Tanis said softly. Open a rotting door. He peered in. It's dark in here. We'll need a light. There was a sound of flint striking metal, and then a flare of light as Caraman lit one of the torches they had borrowed from the high vault. The warrior handed one to Tanis and lit one for himself and Riverwind. Tanis stepped inside the building and immediately found himself up to his ankles in water. Holding the torch aloft, he saw water pouring in steady streams down the walls of the dismal room. It swirled around the center of the floor, then ran out through cracks around the edges. Tanis sloshed to the center and held his torch close to the water. There it is. I can see it, he said, as the others waded into the room. He pointed to a trap door in the floor. An iron pull ring was barely visible in its center. Caraman. Tanis stood back. Flint snorted. If a gully dwarf can open this, I can open it. Stand aside. The dwarf elbowed everyone back, plunged his hand into the water, and heaved. There was a moment's silence. Flint grunted. His face turned red. He stopped, straightened up with a gasp, then reached down and tried again. There wasn't a creak. The door remained shut. Tanis put his hand on the dwarf's shoulder. Flint. Book1 says she only goes down during the dry season. You're trying to lift half of New Sea along with the door. Well, the dwarf puffed for breath. Why didn't you say so? Let the big ox try his luck. Caraman stepped forward. He reached down into the water and gave a heave. His shoulder muscles bulged, and veins in his neck stood out. There was a sucking sound. Then the suction was released so suddenly that the big warrior nearly fell over backward. Water drained from the room as Caraman eased the wooden plank door over. Tanis held his torch down to see. A 4-foot square shaft gaped in the floor. A narrow iron ladder descended into the shaft. What's the count? Tanis asked, his throat dry. 403, answered Sturm's deep voice. 404. The companions stood around the trapdoor, shivering in the chill air, hearing nothing but the sound of water pouring down the shaft. 451. Noted the ninth final. Tanis scratched his beard. Caraman coughed twice, as though reminding them of his absent brother. Flint fidgeted and dropped his axe in the water. Tas absent-mindedly chewed on the end of his topknot. Gold Moon, pale but composed, drew near Riverwind, the nondescript brown staff in her hand. He put his arm around her. Nothing was worse than waiting. 500, said Sturm finally. About time. Tasselhoff swung himself down onto the ladder. Tanis went next, holding his torch to light the way for Gold Moon, who came after him. The others followed, climbing slowly down into an access shaft of the city sewage system. The shaft ran about 20 feet straight down, then opened up into a 5-foot wide tunnel that ran north and south. Check the depth of the water. Tanis warned the Kender as Tas was about to let go of the ladder. The Kender, hanging onto the last rung with one hand, lowered his hupak staff into the dark, swirling water before him. The staff sank about halfway.
2 feet.
Said Tas cheerfully. He dropped in with a splash, the water hitting him around the thighs. He looked up at Tanis, inquiringly. That way. Tanis pointed, south. Holding his staff in the air, Tasselhoff let the current sweep him along. Where's that diversion? Sturm asked, his voice echoing. Tanis had been wondering that himself. We probably won't be able to hear anything down here. He hoped that was true. Raced will come through, don't worry, Karaman said grimly.
Tanis!
Tasselhoff fell back into the half-elf.
There's something down here. I felt it go by my feet.
Just keep moving, Tanis muttered. And hope it isn't hungry. They waded on in silence, the torchlight flickering off the walls, creating illusions in the mind's eye. More than once, Tanis saw something reach out for him, only to realize it was the shadow cast by Karaman's helm, or Tass's hoop. The tunnel ran straight south for about 200 feet, then turned east. Stopped. Down the eastern arm of the sewer glimmered a column of dim light, filtering from above. This, according to Book1, marked the dragon's lair. Douse the torches, Tanis hissed, plunging his torch in the water. Touching the slimy wall, Tanis followed the Kender, Tass's red outline showing up vividly to his elven eyes through the tunnel. Behind him, he heard Flint complaining about the effects of water on his rheumatism. Shh, Tanis whispered, as they drew near the light. Trying to be silent in spite of clanking armor, they soon stood by a slender ladder that ran up to an iron grating.
No one ever bothers to lock floor gratings.
Tass pulled Tanis close to whisper in his ear.
But I'm sure I can open it if it is.
Tanis nodded. He didn't add that Book1 had been able to open it as well. The art of picking locks was as much a matter of pride to the Kender as Sturm's mustaches were to the knight. They all stood, watching, knee-deep in water, as Tass skimmed up the ladder. I still don't hear anything outside, Sturm muttered. Shh, Karaman growled harshly. The grating had a lock, a simple one that Tass opened in moments. Then he silently lifted the grating and peered out. Sudden darkness descended on him, darkness so thick and impenetrable it seemed to hit him like a lead weight, nearly making him lose his hold on the grating. Hurriedly, he put the grating back into place without making a sound, then slid down the ladder, bumping into Tass. Tass? The half-elf grabbed him. Is that you? I can't see. What's going on?
I don't know. It just got dark all of a sudden.
What do you mean you can't see?
Oh, shit.
Sturm whispered to Tanis. What about your elf talent? Gone, Tanis said grimly. Just as in dark and wood. And out by the well. No one spoke as they stood huddled in the tunnel. All they could hear was the sound of their own breathing and water dripping from the wells. The dragon was up there, waiting for them.
Oh, what the hell?
Chapter 21. The sacrifice. The twice dead sinner. Despair, blacker than the darkness, blinded Tanis. It was my plan. The only way we had a chance to get out of here alive. He thought. It was sound. It should have worked. What went wrong? Raceland. Could he have betrayed us? No. Tanis clenched his fist. No, damn it. The mage was distant, unlikable. Impossible to understand, yes, but he was loyal to them. Tanis would swear. Where was Raceland? Dead, perhaps. Not that it mattered. They would all be dead. Tanis. The half-elf felt a firm grasp on his arm and recognized Sturm's deep voice. I know what you're thinking. We have no choice. We're running out of time. This is our only chance to get the discs. We won't get another. I'm going to look, Tanis said. He climbed past the kender and peered through the grate. It was dark. Magically dark. Tanis put his head in his hand and tried to think. Sturm was right. Time was running out. Yet how could he trust the knight's judgment? Sturm wanted to fight the dragon. Tanis crawled back down the ladder. We're going, he said. Suddenly, all he wanted to do was get this over with. Then they could go home. Home to solace. No, Tas. He grabbed hold of the kender and dragged him back down the ladder. The fighters go first. Sturm and Caravan. Then the rest. But the knight was already shoving past him eagerly, his sword clanking against his thigh. We're always last, Tasselhoff sniffed, shoving the dwarf along. Flint climbed the ladder slowly, his knees creaking. Hurry up, Tass said. I hope nothing happens before we get there. I've never talked to a dragon. I'll bet the dragons never talk to a kender either, the dwarf snorted. You realize, you harebrain, that we're probably going to die. Tanis knows. I could tell by his voice. Tass paused, clinging to the ladder, while Sturm slowly pushed on the grating. You know, Flint, the kender said seriously, my people don't fear death. In a way, we look forward to it, the last big adventure. But I think I'd feel badly about leaving this life. I'd miss my things. He patted his pouches. And my maps, and you, and Tanis. Unless, he added brightly, we all go to the same place when we die. Flint had a sudden vision of the happy-go-lucky kender lying cold and dead. He felt a lump of pain in his chest and was thankful for the concealing darkness. Clearing his throat, he said huskily, if you think I'm going to share my afterlife with a bunch of kender, you're crazier than Raceland. Come on! Sturm carefully lifted the grating and shoved it to one side. It scraped over the floor, causing him to grit his teeth. He heaved himself up easily. Turning, he bent down to help Karen, who was having trouble squeezing his body and his clanking arsenal through the shaft. In the name of Istar, be quiet! Sturm hissed. I'm trying, Karaman muttered, finally climbing over the edge. Sturm gave his hand to Gold Moon. Last came Tass, delighted that nobody had done anything exciting in his absence. We've got to have light, Sturm said. Light? Replied a voice as cold and dark as winter midnight. Yes. Let us have light. The darkness fled instantly. The companions saw they were in a huge domed chamber that soared hundreds of feet into the air. Cold gray light filtered into the room through a crack in the ceiling, shining on a large altar in the center of the circular room. On the floor surrounding the altar were masses of jewels, coins, and other treasures of the dead city. The jewels did not gleam. The gold did not glitter. The dim light illuminated nothing except a black dragon perched on top of the pedestal like some huge beast of prey. Feeling betrayed, the dragon asked in conversational tones. The mage betrayed us. Where is he? Serving you? Sturm cried fiercely, drawing his sword and taking a step forward. Stand back, foul knight of Solamnia. Stand back, or your magic user will use his magic no more. The dragon snaked her great neck down and stared at it with gleaming red eyes. Then, slowly and delicately, she lifted one clawed foot. Lying beneath it, on the pedestal, was Raistland. Raced! Caraman roared and lunged for the altar. Stop, fool! The dragon hissed. She rested one pointed claw lightly on the mage's abdomen. With a great effort, Raistland moved his head to look at his brother with his strange golden eyes. He made a weak gesture, and Caraman halted. Tanis saw something move on the floor beneath the altar. It was Book1, huddled among the riches, too afraid even to whimper. The staff of Magius lay next to her. Move one step closer, and I will impale this shriveled human upon the altar with my claw. Caraman's face flushed a deep, ugly red. Let him go! He shouted. Your fight is with me! My fight is with none of you, the dragon said, lazily moving its wings. Raistland flinched as the dragon's clawed foot shifted slightly, teasingly, digging her claw into his flesh. The mage's metallic skin glistened with sweat. He drew a deep, ragged breath. Don't even twitch, mage. The dragon sneered. We speak the same language, remember? One word of a spell and your friends' carcasses will be used to feed the gully dwarves. Raistland's eyes closed as in exhaustion. But Tanis could see the mage's hands clench and unclench, and he knew Raistland was preparing one final spell. It would be his last. By the time he cast it, the dragon would kill him. But it might give Riverwind a chance to reach the discs and get out alive with Gold Moon. Tanis edged toward the plainsman. As I was saying, the dragon continued smoothly, I do not choose to fight any of you. How you have escaped my wrath so far, I do not understand. Still, you are here, and you return to me that which was stolen. Yes, Lady of Gueshu. I see you hold the blue crystal staff. Bring it to me. Tanis hissed one word to Gold Moon. Stole. But, looking at her cool marble face, he wondered if she heard him, or if she even heard the dragon. She seemed to be listening to other words, other voices. Obey me. The dragon lowered her head, menacing. Obey me, or the mage dies. And after him, the knight, and then the half-elf, and so on, one after the other, until you, Lady of Gueshu, are the last survivor. Then you will bring me the staff, and you will beg me to be merciful. Gold Moon bowed her head in submission, gently pushing Riverwind away with her hand. She turned to Tanis and clasped the half-elf in a loving embrace. Farewell, my friend, she said loudly, laying her cheek against his. Her voice dropped to a whisper. I know what I must do. I'm going to take the staff to the dragon and... No, Tanis said fiercely. It won't matter. The dragon intends to kill us anyway. Listen to me. Gold Moon's nails dug into Tanis's arm. Stay with Riverwind, Tanis. Do not let him try to stop you. And if I tried to stop you? Tanis asked gently, holding Gold Moon close in his arms. You won't, she said with a sweet, sad smile. You know that each of us has a destiny to fulfill, as the Forest Master said. Riverwind will need you. Farewell, my friend. Gold Moon stepped back, her clear blue eyes on Riverwind as though she would memorize every detail to keep with her throughout the journey. Realizing she was saying goodbye, he started to go to her. Riverwind, Tanis said softly. She trusted you all those years. She waited while you fought the battles. Now it is you who must wait. This is her battle. Riverwind trembled, then stood still. Tanis could see the veins swell in his neck, his jaw muscles clenched. The half-elf gripped the plainsman's arm. The tall man didn't even look at him. His eyes were on Gold Moon. "What is this delay?" the dragon asked. "I grow bored. Come forward." Gold Moon turned away from Riverwind. She walked past Flint and Tasselhoff. The dwarf bowed his head. Tass watched, wide-eyed and solemn. Somehow this wasn't as exciting as he had imagined. For the first time in his life, the Kender felt small and helpless and alone. It was a horrible, unpleasant feeling, and he thought death might be preferable. Gold Moon stopped near Caroline, put her hand on his arm. "Don't worry," she said to the big warrior, who was staring at his brother in agony. "You'll be all right." Caroline choked and nodded. And then Gold Moon neared the stern. Suddenly, as if the horror of the dragon was too overwhelming, she slumped forward. The knight caught her and held her. "Come with me, Stone," Gold Moon whispered as he put his arm around her. "You must vow to do as I command, no matter what happens. Vow on your honor as a knight of Salam." Sturm hesitated. Gold Moon's eyes, calm and clear, met his. "Vow," she demanded, "or I go alone." "I vow, lady," he said reverently. "I will obey." Gold Moon sighed thankfully. "Walk with me. Make no threatening gesture." Together, the barbarian woman of the plains and the knight walked toward the dragon. Raceland lay beneath the dragon's claw, his eyes closed, preparing himself mentally for the spell that would be his last. But the words to the spell would not form out of the turmoil of his mind. He fought to regain control. "I am wasting myself, and for what?" Raceland wondered bitterly. "To get these fools out of the mess they got themselves into. They will not attack for fear of hurting me, even though they fear and despise me. It makes no sense. Just as my sacrifice makes no sense. Why am I dying for them when I deserve to live more than they? It is not for them you do this." A voice answered him. Raceland started, trying to concentrate, to catch hold of the voice. It was a real voice, a familiar voice, but he couldn't remember whose it was or where he had heard it. All he knew was that it spoke to him in moments of great stress. The closer to death he came, the louder was the voice. "It is not for them that you make this sacrifice," the voice repeated. "It is because you cannot bear defeat. Nothing has ever defeated you, not even death itself." Raceland drew a deep breath and relaxed. He did not understand the words completely, just as he could not remember the voice. But now, the spell came easily to his mind. "Astolarak he murmured, feeling the magic begin to course through his frail body. Then another voice broke his concentration, and this voice was a living voice, speaking to his mind. He opened his eyes, turned his head slowly, and stared into the chamber at his companions. The voice came from the woman, barbarian princess of a dead tribe. Raceland looked at Gold Moon as she walked toward him, leaning on Sturm's arm. The words in her mind had touched Raceland's mind. He regarded the woman coldly, detachedly. His distorted vision had forever killed any physical desire the mage might have felt when he looked upon human flesh. He could not see the beauty that so captivated Tanis and his brother. His hourglass eyes saw her withering and dying. He felt no closeness, no compassion for her. He knew she pitied him, and he hated her for that. But she feared him as well, so why then was she speaking to him? She was telling him to wait. Raistlin understood. She knew what he intended, and she was telling him it wasn't necessary. She had been chosen. She was the one who was going to make the sacrifice. He watched Gold Moon with his strange golden eyes as she drew nearer and nearer, her own eyes on the dragon. He saw Sturm moving solemnly beside her, looking as ancient and noble as old Huma himself. What a perfect cat's paw Sturm made, the ideal participant in Gold Moon's sacrifice. Why had Riverwind allowed her to go? Couldn't he see this coming? Raistlin glanced quickly at Riverwind. Ah, of course. The half-elf stood by his side, looking pained and grieved, dropping words of wisdom, like blood, no doubt. The barbarian was becoming as gullible as Caravan. Raistlin flicked his eyes back to Gold Moon. She stood before the dragon now, her face pale with resolve. Next to her, Sturm appeared grave and tortured, gnawed by inner conflict. Gold Moon had probably extracted some vow of strict obedience, which the knight was honor bound to fulfill. Raistlin's lip curled in a sneer. The dragon spoke, and the mage tensed, ready for action. Lay down the staff with the other remnants of mankind's folly, the dragon commanded Gold Moon, inclining her shiny, scaled head toward the pile of treasure below the altar. Gold Moon, overcome with dragon fear, did not move. She could do nothing but stare at the monstrous creature, trembling. Sturm, next to her, searched the treasure trove with his eyes, looking for the discs of Nishikai, fighting to control his fear of the dragon. Sturm had not known he could be this frightened of anything. He repeated the code, honor his life, over and over, and he knew it was pride alone that kept him from running away. Gold Moon saw Sturm's hand shake. She saw the knight's face glisten with sweat. Dear goddess, she cried in her soul, grant me the courage. Then Sturm nudged her. She had to say something, she realized. She had been silent too long. What will you give us in return for the miraculous staff? Gold Moon asked, forcing herself to speak calmly, though her throat was parched, and her tongue felt swollen. The dragon laughed, shrill, ugly laughter. What will I give you? The dragon snaked her head to stare at Gold Moon. Nothing. Nothing at all. I do not deal with thieves. Still, the dragon reared its head back, its red eyes closed to slits. Playfully, she dug her claw into Raistlin's flesh. The mage flinched, but he bore the pain without a murmur. The dragon removed the claw and held it just high enough so that they could all see the blood drip from it. It is not inconceivable that Lord Verminor, the Dragon High Master, may view favorably the fact that you surrender the staff. He may even be inclined to mercy. He is a cleric, and they have strange values. But know this, Lady of Clay Shield, Lord Verminor does not need your friends. Give up the staff now, and they will be spared. Force me to take it, and they will die. The mage, first of all. Gold Moon, her spirit seemingly broken, slumped in defeat. Sturm moved close to her, appearing to console her. I have found the discs, he whispered harshly. He grasped her arm, feeling her shivering with fear. Are you resolved on this course of action, my lady? He said softly. Gold Moon bowed her head. She was deathly pale, but composed and calm. Tendrils of her fine, silver golden hair had escaped from the binding and fell around her face, hiding her expression from the dragon. Though she appeared defeated, she looked up at Sturm and smiled. There was both peace and sorrow in her smile, much like the smile of the marble goddess. She did not speak, but Stern had his answer. He bowed in submission. May my courage be equal to yours, he said. I will not fail. Farewell. Tell Riverwind. Gold Moon faltered, blinking her eyes as tears filled them. Fearing her resolve might yet break, she swallowed her words and turned to face the dragon, as the voice of Michiko filled her being, answering her prayer. Present the staff boldly. Gold Moon, imbued with an inner strength, raised the blue crystal staff. We do not choose to surrender, Gold Moon shouted, her voice echoing throughout the chamber. Moving swiftly before the startled dragon could react, Chieftain's daughter swung her staff one last time, striking the clawed foot poised above Raceland. The staff made a low, ringing sound as it struck the dragon. Then it shattered. A burst of pure, radiant blue light beamed from the broken staff. The light grew brighter, spreading out in concentric waves, engulfing the dragon. Kisanth screamed in rage. The dragon was injured, terribly, mortally. She lashed out with her tail, flung her head about, and fought to escape the burning blue flame. She wanted nothing except to kill those that dared inflict such pain, but the intense blue fire relentlessly consumed her, as it consumed Gold Moon. The chieftain's daughter had not dropped the staff when it shattered. She held on to the fragmented end, watching as the light grew, keeping it as close to the dragon as she could. When the blue light touched her hands, she felt intense, burning pain. Staggering, she fell to her knees, still clutching the staff. She heard the dragon shrieking and roaring above her. Then she could hear nothing but the ringing of the staff. The pain grew so horrible it was no longer a part of her, and she was overcome with a great weariness. I will sleep, she thought. I will sleep. And when I wake, I will be where I truly belong. Sturm saw the blue light slowly destroy the dragon. Then it spread along the staff to Gold Moon. He heard the ringing sound grow louder and louder until it drowned out even the screams of the dying dragon. Sturm took a step toward Gold Moon, thinking to wrench the splintered staff from her hand and drag her clear of the deadly blue flame. But even as he approached, he knew he could not save her. Half blinded by the light and deafened by the sound, the knight realized that it would take all his strength and courage to fulfill his oath, to retrieve the gift. He tore his gaze from Gold Moon, whose face was twisted in agony and whose flesh was withering in the fire. Gritting his teeth against the pain in his head, he staggered toward the treasure pile.
All right, everyone. I'm going to call it into this live for tonight. But I want to thank everyone for stopping by and everyone who continues to stop by. I definitely appreciate all y'all's support. Until next time, everyone. Y'all stay safe out there.